For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Lumgile Nkomfe. Joining me is author and cartoonist Jonathan Zapiro, aka Zapiro, here to discuss his new book titled What Else Could Go Wrong? So, Jonathan, your book captures a year marked by South Africa's coalition turbulence, global democratic backsliding, and conflict in the Middle East. What do you think these fault lines reveal about the true state of South Africa and the world today?
I'm not sure that I would come up with one single glib answer. I'm interested that you call it South Africa's coalition fault lines because, it's commonly referred to as the GNU or the NU, which is the character that I have on the front of the annual. I think you're completely right. It is a coalition. It isn't a genuine government of national unity like the one that Nelson Mandela had in 1994 to 95. And the kind of fault lines are a big part of it. I think, to me, what's been fascinating this year is our local politics intersecting with the global stuff, intersecting with the fact that in America you have the most powerful person in the world is somebody who hates multilateralism and who hates a lot of the things that the South African government and a lot of the South African people support. The idea of Ubuntu, the idea of being accommodating in some way to people who come from other places, the idea of fighting against climate change because climate change affects the global South even more than it affects the rest of the world, but it affects the whole world. These are things that are part of our DNA and our politics here, and Trump has been a malevolent force. So I think, it's that tussle that we've also seen now at the G20. And I think in a way we've won a battle. We certainly haven't won the war. But I think by Trump staying away from the G20 and then trying to kind of sabotage it, and our running a good G20 where you have a multilateral agreement that comes out of it is an interesting little battle win in the context of this big war.
Now, Jonathan, your cartoons poke at the awkward tensions between the US and South Africa. What truth about SA-US power balances are you telling through satire that diplomats can't or won't be able to tell?
As a cartoonist, I can be ruder. I can, I'm trying to read between the lines and I'm trying to be irreverent. A cartoon that comes to mind from your question is the one of Ibrahim Rasool, our then ambassador to the United States, or ambassador designate, when it was revealed that he had told some sort of cold, hard truths about Trump, opinion you could call it, but when he called Trump a white supremacist, which is absolutely true, and then was told that he's not going to be coming to the United States. I saw our government, I saw President Ramaphosa, I saw even some of the analysts and even people in media tut-tutting and saying you can't do that, and basically essentially throwing Ibrahim Rasool under the bus. So I have not just government, but even people in media that are people that I'm involved with. I was thinking all of them were part of that, some kind of kowtowing to Trump. And I, as a cartoonist, that's the last thing I need to do. I know probably of all people involved in politics and in global issues, cartoonists are sort of right at the far end of needing least approval from the powerful. I understand that there are other people who have far more pragmatic needs to actually be a bit diplomatic. But yeah, I think it's our job to be the least diplomatic, to actually, take the piss and to actually really tell it like it is, well, as I see it, yeah.
When you comment on South Africa's governance and service delivery failures and our country's endless corruption scandals, do you ever feel that satire is being outpaced by reality?
This is a theme of mine. I feel like I kind of, in a sense, started the ball rolling on that concept 25 years ago. Because I actually did a cartoon that said exactly that. I did a cartoon of myself on a therapist's couch, holding my cartoons, and the therapist says to me, "Since when have you had these feelings of uselessness?" I said, "Since last week, when reality became weirder than anything I could dream up." And on the floor, there are newspapers, and the one says, cops install panic button to call security firms, which is something that we've got more and more used to. But 25 years ago, it was the first time we saw that. And it's like, that's bizarre. The cops can't control anything, but they call the security firms when they're panicking. And then the other one was whole schools stolen. Now, I come from Cape Town, and that referred to a school in Khayelitsha that was in 2 containers. And one night somebody came and they put the containers on a truck and stole the school. And those kind of things are just, in South Africa we have crazy stuff. Crazy stuff happens everywhere. And now, America is sort of competing with us in the crazy department and sort of beating us in many respects. But that idea is something that I've been talking about for a quarter of a century.
When you work on cartoons on the Gaza crisis, how did you balance the need to message condemnation and moral clarity against the risk that you could be accused of bias and worse, given the high degree of polarization on the issue?
That's a difficult question to answer. I try not to think about the risks as much as I think about what I need to say and what I want to say, because that's not the only issue. It's a huge issue. It's one of the biggest ones. It's a litmus test at the moment, I think, on morality and moral conscience. But I've had to think about whether I would do a Prophet Muhammad cartoon. Like, what were the risks there? And I did do a Prophet Muhammad cartoon, and I was under a lot of threat. In this instance of Israel and Gaza, again, I keep talking about a kind of quarter of a century, but I've been doing these cartoons condemning Israel and supporting the Palestinians and shouting about occupation and shouting about human rights abuses and about ethnic cleansing. I've been talking about these things for many years. And on October 7, or just after, I condemned the Hamas attack as an atrocity, which I think it was. Even in the right cause, I definitely condemned it as an atrocity. It was a terrible thing. Attacks against civilians, it was terrible. But I already did, right then, I did the first cartoon I did about it, talked about the context and said, the Israelis are already overreacting. The Israelis are already going to make this thing an absolute atrocity, bigger than anything Hamas could do. And in the context of this occupation and abuses and ethnic cleansing of 75 years. And I knew I would face a lot of backlash, which I have done in the Jewish community, but I've also faced backlash from politicians the Zuma in particular. He's really vindictive, has really gone for me in 2 massive lawsuits and tried to kind of push me out so I think in any of these issues I'm more interested in trying to say what I need to say than in the risks, although, I think about the risks.
At times, you've been criticized for going too far in your satirical commentary. As we sit here at the end of 2025, where do you personally draw the line between fearless commentary and unnecessary provocation?
My biggest concern in terms of how I approach issues and how I approach powerful people, powerful groups, is to punch up and not punch down. If I'm punching up, if I'm attacking people for being xenophobic or for being homophobic or for being misogynist, then I'm prepared to hit very hard and punch up. I don't want to, by mistake or tangentially, kind of stigmatize groups of ordinary people. So that's what I have to kind of watch out for. If I do that by mistake, then I think I may have gone too far. And, we're all fallible. So there may be a couple of cartoons that I've done where I look back and I think, ooh, that could be interpreted in a way that it could punch down. But I try not to do that. When I'm punching up, I'll go as far as I can.
After decades of exposing power through humor, what gives you hope that satire can still influence public accountability in South Africa?
It's always hard to see exact cause and effect with satire. It's very difficult to say, well, this particular cartoon has actually changed things. I'm lucky enough to have been in in a place where cartoons and satire have really mattered, and there have been instances where my cartoons, I've done talks where I have one or two cartoons here and there where you can actually see cause and effect. So I know that it is still possible. I think what is more prevalent and more common is for me to be joining the kind of groups and the kinds of discourses where a group of people saying different things and speaking together and saying diverse things. You don't have to speak in one voice, but you sort of join the conversation and you kind of poke holes and poke fun. You become part of a sort of a movement that can change things. And that, I think, happens all the time. So I am optimistic about my cartoons joining that kind of thread of people who are fighting against all kinds of things, and we can see incremental changes here and there.
This is your 30th book. What are the key differences between this version and the first?
My 30th annual, it is a huge thing. In a way, there's something very similar about all of them, all 30, because the whole idea that I had when I started was that I wanted it to be an annual. When I was a little kid, I was sitting avidly looking at the covers of the Giles annuals. Giles is a great British cartoonist, quite a progressive, left-leaning guy who was in a newspaper that wasn't that left-leaning, the Daily Express. But he had these cartoons about the sort of common people, ordinary people. So it's kind of social commentary cartoons, really fun. And I loved the covers as well. The covers always had a lot of things happening and somebody about to get their kind of comeuppance. And I thought already when I was a little kid like that, I thought, one day I can do something like this. I'd like to. And I wasn't thinking politically, because it was just I liked the books. And then I was into Charles Schulz, Peanuts, and Tintin, Hergé Tintin, and I thought maybe I'd be an assistant to one of them. That was my idea. But as I became an actual political cartoonist when I was older, my politics had started to gel, and I became an activist. And in the years that I began at the Mail and Guardian in '94 and the Sowetan also in '94, I quickly developed enough cartoons to say, well, I really want to have an annual. I had enough cartoons for an annual in 1995, but I didn't know what the form of this thing was going to be, because at that stage, the idea, like, what format do you want? Are there going to be captions? All of those things. What sort of cover? What would work as a cover? How do I put my name, etc.? Then I had to kind of feel that out, and I missed '95. 1996, I went to David Philip Publishers, where Bridget Impey was as well. And I said, look, I really want to do an annual. And they said to me, we'd love to do that. We would publish 1,500. And I said, I'm in big newspapers. I would not do an annual that, I wouldn't do a print run of anything less than 5,000. And they kind of looked at me and like, who's this guy? And they said, we'll do some market research. They went out, did some market research. A week later, they came back to me and they said, we'll do 7,000. So I said, great. A week later, they said, we'll do 8,000. I said, sure. A week later, 9,000. Meanwhile, the problem was there was no book. I still didn't have the format. I didn't have anything, and I was starting to panic. Eventually, I managed to get a cover and a title. I got the title was, I thought, the Mandela years. And I thought, no, what's better than that? The Madiba years. I felt it defined that era. And then I got the title, and I thought, if I've got this title, maybe I can get a comment from Nelson Mandela, go big. So I went to Parks Manakaklana, Mandela's spokesperson, and I phoned him, and I said, look, can we get a comment? He said, yeah. So I dropped the cartoons off at Parliament, and then a couple of days later, he called me, and he said, yes, Madiba has commented. So I wanted to get the piece of paper. And he said, Madiba's comment was very exciting and quite accurate. And I thought, that's fantastic to have. Well, what does quite accurate mean? Sort of rather or sort of. And then I thought, no, Madiba's, that sort of old school thing of Madiba, it means exactly accurate, precisely accurate. And I thought, I'll go with that. Anyway, so I put that on the back. I got a foreword from none other than Peter Dirk Ace as a Vita beside note. And then I thought I'll get the Arch to do the launch. So I really got like everybody in. And the Arch was thrilled. So then the Arch came out. We had this fantastic launch. The Arch came out onto this balcony at the Old Town House where there were a lot of people. Lovely day, and there was sort of creeper growing. So out he comes onto the balcony in his magenta robes, and he says, "I feel like Juliet." And then everybody, brought the house down, and so that annual then had such a great launch. And by the time they published 11,500 annuals, and they'd wanted to publish 1,500. We sold like 10,000 in the first year, and from that sprang this yearly thing. And now this one, in some ways, it's no different from the others. Of course, the politics has changed. We've been through so many different things, but the essence of it is what we started in 1996. And I'm so excited to see like little kids looking at my annuals the way that I used to look at the Giles annual.
That was Jonathan Shapiro discussing his book, What Else Could Go Wrong? Visit the Polity website to access more author interviews, news, and information updates. If you haven't already, subscribe to Polity's email services, including our new monthly Polity Bookshelf email, to stay informed about the latest news and Polity Bookshelf developments.